our exciting webinar today on migratory birds and learn how we can help protect critical migratory routes and flyways. So I am not sure who we want to start with, but today we have Susan Bonfield, who is the Executive Director of World Migratory Bird Day and Environment for the Americas, along with her colleague Miguel E. Matta Pereira. How'd I do? Who is the coordinator for World Migratory Bird Day Latin America. And they are joined as well with Kyle G. Horton, PhD, Dr. Kyle, who is an assistant professor at Colorado State University. And they all have incredible breadth of knowledge around birds and light pollution, and will each give us a little overview of their work and their topic. So let's go ahead. And do you have anybody have a preferred order? If we go ahead and start with Susan.
All right, I'm happy to start.
Great.
So thank you so much for joining today. And I hope by the end of today, you'll be at 100% on that question about being here for the birds. So Environment for the Americas, we're a nonprofit organization. We're based in Boulder, Colorado, but we work across the Western Hemisphere and globally with partners to raise awareness of migratory birds and migratory bird conservation. So we are about, when did we start? We launched in 2008. And we work with over 800 partners across the Americas. So quite a number of partners that we work with. And our Keystone Education program is World Migratory Bird Day. We have an amazing team, which includes Miguel, who is the Latin American coordinator for World Migratory Bird Day. And we have a team that works out of Mexico, Central America. Miguel himself is based in Venezuela. And Trinidad and Tobago to take on those regions and to introduce information about migratory birds and their conservation. So World Migratory Bird Day is the program that launched Environment for the Americas. It's also the program that has led to all of our other activities across the Western Hemisphere. Many of them continue to be international, and some are more US-based, but wherever we go, we work with many diverse communities to promote bird conservation. And so when you think about migratory birds, and coming to this meeting with DarkSky, which thank you very much for having us today. This was an incredible theme for Migratory Bird Day, and I'll get into that in just a minute. But when you think about migratory birds, you think about all sorts of threats to their survival. And one of them is, for example, the conversion or the loss of habitat. So one way that habitat can be converted from natural landscapes is through agriculture. And what you see in this is on the left side is a big avocado plantation in Mexico, and on the right is the Salinas Valley in Southern California. And you can see that both are taking over huge acreages of land. Of course, we need that food for our people. But these are also places where birds once migrated through. And if you can see the Salinas Valley on the right, this is also a riparian corridor, which likely provides a good movement corridor for birds as they move north and south between the United States and Mexico, especially for Western migratory birds. Another factor, and this is the city where I live, which is Boulder, Colorado, is urbanization. So increased housing, the buildings that come with it, the encroachment on natural landscapes. And you can see that we've developed Boulder up into the foothills. And even Boulder has such a great open space philosophy, but still you can see how much of the land has been taken from its natural state. And then other factors like cats, which are one of the leading causes of mortality in birds as well. So these cats that are allowed to roam free are known to capture a variety of species of birds as well as other organisms, and amazing the size of animals that they can actually capture. Well, so one of the things that we never really thought about until we started working with DarkSky International is is the sky as a habitat and what that means for birds. So when you look up at the sky, I think everybody thinks, oh, we're going to go there to look at the stars and the planets. But not many people think about going outdoors and looking up at the skies as this vast expanse of habitat which birds depend on. And they do, both during the day and at night. And it gave us a really new perspective working with the experts at DarkSky and with Kyle and others who study this topic to learn about the factors that can impact birds as they're using these sky flyways. So what's going on and why did we get interested in this? Well, one thing is that through World Migratory Bird Day, we're always looking for critical factors that impact migratory birds and the ways that we can share those with the general public. And most importantly, the ways that we can motivate people, like you said today, to change their behaviors for the benefit of migratory birds. And so we've addressed a number of different topics. And in 2022, this was our main theme. We always have a primary theme, and then we continue it in years after. So again, here we are 2 years later, and we're still involved in looking at dark skies, and that's wonderful. That's what we want to see. But what you can see here is migration happening on top of a global map that illustrates light pollution. And you can see that light pollution is primarily in the north, whereas the developing countries, such as look at South America, not as light polluted as North America. So you can see where birds are going to and from and the amount of light that they're faced with as they migrate, and then of course as they nest and as they overwinter as well. It's estimated that about 10% of the planet's surface has artificial light at night, and that number I'm sure is growing. And we also work with our global partners. So in 2022, our partners at the Convention on Migratory Species, which is a United Nations Environment Program, issued their light pollution guidelines for wildlife. And so each year when we select a conservation theme for World Migratory Bird Day, we consider what's going on in the world and how we can expand our reach. And combined with these guidelines that were issued by the United Nations, we were able to launch the theme of dark skies under the slogan of "Dim the lights for birds at night." And I think one of our greatest successes is seeing that slogan continue. We've seen so many organizations adopt it in their programs as they've implemented them. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later too. So what do we do for World Migratory Bird Day? Well, what we start with is the art, and the art serves as the heart of the program. Each year we select a new artist, and I know Miguel will talk a little bit more about this. And we also select the birds that are going to serve as our focal point for the theme. Each bird has a meaning. We don't choose a bird without some sort of science behind it. So all of these birds are birds that we found somewhere in the literature as migrating at night and as being impacted by light pollution. We also, if you can tell, we try to get a nice, broad, diverse array of different birds representing different families. So in here you see shorebirds, warblers, raptor, a duck on the top left. So it's a fun group of birds that permits every kind of group to take part in World Migratory Bird Day each year. And how does light impact migratory birds? It's, we go to bed at night and we don't realize what's happening as we sleep, but millions of birds pass over at different times of the year as they're moving from one place to another, particularly during spring and fall migrations. So spring migration has been underway. Depending on the group of birds, migration can happen at different times of the year. Shorebirds, for example, migrate earlier than many of the warblers. So you might be able to say that migration happens almost year-round in some way. But one of the critical aspects of light is that it attracts birds for some reason. And we don't really, I don't know, maybe Kyle can add to this, but we don't really know why. But they're attracted to light, much like you see when you turn on your porch light and you see insects at the porch light swarming around the light. Birds are somewhat the same way. And as far as we understand, it's not just from these tall buildings. It can be from the entire footprint of a city that attracts them in, and it can disorient them, taking them off their path and also impacting their migrations. Light can also affect behaviors. For example, black-crowned night heron likes to hunt at night, and when the water is illuminated, it can make it more difficult for it to find its prey. Whereas this little burrowing owl, which is actually a diurnal species, might be disrupted at night when lights are on, somewhere near where it's breeding or nesting. And if you're not familiar with the burrowing owl, this is a cute bird that actually nests in the ground, in cavities in the ground, so in holes, burrows. And so they're out during the daytime, and then, of course, they're trying to get their rest at night. And then you can see this in terms of warblers that are attracted by light, with the added issue that often light is emitted through windows. So these birds have been attracted to the light coming from a window, and there they are, probably exhausted from migrating also. This is a large number of species in one location, so they're exhausted, they're resting, but they're also attracted to a lit location. And then even some of these big sea vessels that are lit up at night can attract and disorient seabirds especially, and those coastal lights as well that you see along boardwalks in seaside cities. I think one of the most illustrative videos that I've seen is this tribute to the victims of the 9/11 incident in the United States in New York. And one of the ways that people wanted to recognize this loss of human life was through a tribute of light. And the tribute of light happens, of course, during a peak period in migration. And it's a huge beams of lights that are shown into the night sky. And hopefully this will play for you guys. But what you see is this light, and all of those little dots in there are birds. These are birds that are being attracted by the 9/11 lights, and they're trapped by it, swirling around, often until they're exhausted and fall to the ground. Now, fortunately, birders in New York City recognize this problem. I think it's New York Audubon, maybe some other groups that are there on site now to check the lights to make sure that when those lights are emitted into the dark sky, that they pulse them instead of keeping them on as a solid beams of light. And in that way, this allows the birds to escape from that light and to fly on. So they actually track this now and help to protect birds. Let me get off of that. So our big goals with the program are, again, we're trying to reach the public. We're not an expert birder program. What we are is a conservation activity, and it is global. So we work, again, with partners around the world now, but we focus on the Americas. Our goal is to get it out in the media, and by having one conservation theme and one conservation theme that is used around the world is to amplify our voices for conservation. And so we're working to get this information out into many numbers of magazines, on the radio and television, on the Weather Channel. That was a fun one. Anywhere that we can, so that we can, more greatly impact people's awareness and raise awareness of these issues. We also support the hosting of activities on the ground. So there are over 700 World Migratory Bird Day activities that take place in any given year across the Americas. And then more with our partner organizations in Africa, Europe, Asia, and other, Australia, many, many other countries are participating in the program. We also want to see that programs are developed because of World Migratory Bird Day. And like I said, sometimes this is what helps organizations to launch their programs, or it helps them to understand how this factor impacts migratory birds. So for example, in a recent conversation with the Fish and Wildlife Service, they commented that when we hosted this program in 2022, it really helped them spark more interest in developing the program within the service. And that's a nationwide effort. And so this is from their recent webpage, again, using our slogan, "Dim the Lights," but this time they added "for pollinators and plants at night." So we love seeing how groups are incorporating this into their conservation messaging. And then for us, not only are we working with many organizations like DarkSky, International, but we're also working with the Bird City Network. This is a program that's coordinated by the American Bird Conservancy and Environment for the Americas. And what our goal is to engage communities in activities and actions that help make their cities and towns more safer for migratory birds and other birds throughout the year. So it's a wonderful program. There are over 200 bird city communities already. And this year, for the first time, we launched, or last year and this year, we launched programs in Latin America. So Miguel worked with a community in Colombia to start the first Colombian bird city, and our Mexico coordinator, Daniela Sosa, worked with Cozumel to develop the first bird city there, and we'll continue developing those each year. But what we decided we wanted to do was take the Bird City Network and make it a little more focused, especially in areas where the topic is critical for migratory birds. So for example, right now, what the Bird City Network has is a general list of activities and actions that communities can take for the benefit of migratory birds. They can include things like removing invasive species, doing habitat restoration, establishing guidelines for keeping cats indoors. One of the requirements is that you host a World Migratory Bird Day activity or program or event. So you get to select what you want to do. Now we're taking that in a different direction with a recent support that was just provided by the Neotropical Migratory Bird Conservation Act. And what we're doing is we're heading to Panama City in Panama in Central America. And this community is amazing. If you've been to Panama, it's had an extreme rate of population growth and business development from 1960 to 1990. It transformed from a predominantly rural to an urban population. About 2 million people now live in Panama City, and population growth has been about 2% or more per year since 2001. So with this growth in the human population, of course, is this rapid development of the city's skyline, and it's had a really fast-growing economy. So today, the city is known as the skyscraper capital of Latin America. It has 66 buildings over 150 meters tall. 24 of them are over 200 meters tall, and it ranks 26th in the world for the total number of skyscrapers. And in addition, because Panama City has grown so much, the community itself has sprawled. So beyond this concentration of large and tall skyscrapers is a growing city footprint. And so in terms of light pollution, the glow from the light pollution of the city itself, which is on the, well, Panama's kind of funky in its orientation, but it almost touches the glow from the city of Cologne, which is on the Caribbean coast and about 73 kilometers away. But Panama City also stands out in many other ways. For one thing, it's a very narrow bridge across which birds must migrate. So they are migrating through this very narrow area. You can see the lights at night. And as the urban development continues to encroach on natural landscape, this nocturnal illumination from the city has become more and more intense. And the cause for pollution is of great concern. In terms of measuring light pollution, there's something called the Bortle scale, which is 9 points. And Panama City frequently makes it to 7, which means that it is emitting a kind of a gray luminescence throughout the night. And again, this is a point where many migratory birds are migrating, and are concentrated as well. So this is the Audubon Migration Map, Explorer Map, Bird Migration Explorer Map. And if you get a chance online, it's a really great tool. It's very interesting to look at. One thing that you can do is you can take it, you can put in your bird species, and you can look at what are some of the conservation issues that this bird faces. And it's based on as much literature as possible. Now, there's not a whole lot of literature on light pollution and its impacts to migratory birds in Panama. They haven't done a lot of collisions work. They haven't looked at birds migrating over the city. Maybe Maybe Kyle will come up with something that will help us estimate birds flying over Panama City sometime in the near future. But what you can see from this map is these dots and these little hexagons. And the darker the dot gets, the more critical the conservation factor is. So what I did on this map is I screened for light pollution. And I screened for light pollution for the bird that you see on the screen, which is the whimbrel. And I also screened it for many, many other species, but I'm going to use the whimbrel as an example. And so you can see that the whimbrel migrates through Central America and up then as it moves towards North America. Well, the whimbrel is an amazing species. And for this species, light pollution presents a really big challenge for it. And partly because of its kind of extraordinary life cycle, it's very vulnerable to light pollution. Whimbrels are coastal migrants. They breed and nest in subarctic regions, and they have a migration that covers distances up to 9,000 miles, they can reach non-breeding sites as far south as Chile, and along the way, they're going to navigate the coast from Canada to Argentina, and in the east from Canada to Brazil. So light pollution has been identified as a conservation challenge over 6 months of this bird's life. Over its life cycle, with peaks occurring in April and October. And in this map, we recognize Panama City as a source of very high exposure with that dark brown to light pollution in both months. So whimbrel is also known as a tipping point species. That means that it's lost half of its population in the past 50 years, and it's anticipating a further 50% decline by the year 2050. So with Panama City being rated as a very high impact to whimbrel from light pollution, this species was actually joined by a number of other species when we looked at cities that are critical in terms of light pollution. And you can see why. It's about the narrowest point to go through. So for species that aren't on the coast, that are traveling over land, this looks a little bit different. So their dot over Panama, over the word Panama, might actually be brown. But definitely what whimbrel and other shorebird species do is they come in along the coast, but then they move inland, and they might stop to rest, restore, refuel at some of the more inland wetlands. And in that time, they're having to navigate through this community. So whatever light pollution is doing to them or where it's attracting them, it can impact them in several different ways. One, it can disorient them. Two, it can cause them to collide with structures that are lit. And three, as they're resting, the illumination from light can actually impact their behaviors as they're in these wetlands, seeking to rest and refuel. So this is our next project that we'll be working on after we launched World Migratory Bird Day. And that's one of the things we love, again, about World Migratory Bird Day, is it often leads to more projects and to more work on that conservation theme. And we'll be doing this project launching soon and for the next 2 years. So we'll look forward to being able to share with you some of the results of that project. Our partners on the project will be Adopta Panama Rainforest and Audubon Panama. So they are experts in the community there. And with that, what I'd like to do is I'd like to turn this over to Miguel Matta, with thanks to him for all of his work coordinating programs in Latin America and coordinating our Latin American team. And he can continue on sharing more information about not only light pollution, but also World Migratory Bird Day. And I don't know if you want to take questions now, Betty Maya, or if you want to wait and do it at
We'll do questions for everyone at the end, I think.
Okay,
Thank you
great.
so much, Susan. That was a great presentation, and I'm looking forward to Miguel.
Thank you.
Super. Thank you very much, Susan. Do you want to help me sharing the screen and passing the slide, or? Okay. Is look full now?
Yeah,
Perfect.
Okay. Well, thank you, Susan, for that great introduction about light pollution and how this thing really impact our educators and also our World Migratory Bird Day team. There is still educators in Brazil, in Colombia, celebrating the life for birds at night, and that's it's really great see how the program continues. And that's also thanks to all the materials and educational promotion that the program did during 2022. One of the great videos we can share, it is a collaboration we did with Cornell Lab. Let me see if I can share here. Yes, I hope you see the video. One is one of the example of the great example that educational materials that we produce during that particular year and impact very well different educators across the country, across the continent, and we share and translate this conservation into multiple languages, including French, Portuguese, Spanish, English. We help of them global partners, we can translate this conservation team for the major language of the world. And Susan mentioned that every year World Migratory Birthday have an artist that made possible have this beautiful art for educational material, and in that year was Omar Custodio Azabache, who is a Peruvian biologist and also illustrator. He made possible this the American poster. We asked Omar paint the birds facing the people, try to also motivate actions direct on the people who are celebrating and take part of these educational activities. And we made a American poster, but also a global poster in partnership with the CMS, Iowa, and the East Asia and Australasian Flyway. And World Migratory Bird in that year took many different activities, including local activities in universities, school, urban parks. Many people go outside during the night to see the sky, the stars, and try to recognize, for example, the constellations that have bird names. I remember that was one of the most popular activities during that year. And we produced all these materials showing the ecology of this bird and the relation with the conservation team, the light pollution. Also with the educational part of the program, we want to identify educators who need assistance or need support to go a little more. And we identify a group in Chile working with the Mark and Strompeter, that is a group of seabears that is very affected by light pollution, especially in South America, including Chile, Peru, Ecuador. These bears breed in the Atacama Desert, spend the most of the time during in water, flying in open, but when they need to go breathe into this cave in the desert, they need to pass over cities. And in this condition, the bird is disoriented by the light of the cities. Many of these birds you can find dead or exhausted on the street, and that made this individual at risk, for example, predators like cats or dogs on the street. So we partnered with Red de Observadores de Aves y Vida Silvestre Chile, Lola Rod, and we collaborate to raise money for the program and to avoid this sad interaction in Chile, when you can find many a huge percent of the population dying by light pollution. And with this money we raised during that year, they was able to produce a guide that is a severe friendly lighting practices for not only for Chile, it also is replicated for different countries now in the region. And just to conclude and take a message to home, we produce different materials to teach simple actions that everybody can do at home. And we translate this in infographics that can be attractive to different publics. Some of them are related to the way we illuminate our street, our homes, our gardens, and how we can save birds at night. Especially, we can, of course, people here is more expert than us in identify this methodology, but for example, focus the light to the street, or turn off your light at home to save energy and to avoid birds disrupt their migration journeys. And thank you so much for the time you spend with us this afternoon, and we are happy to provide all this material you need for future educational programs. I know these educational material are still updated, and people enjoy a lot do educational work at night, especially because it was a very methodology for us too. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Miguel. I love the idea of going outside and looking for bird-themed constellations. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us. And we will move now to Kyle. Looking forward to your talk. Thank you.
Can you see the slides on your end?
Yep,
Cool.
it looks great.
Thanks. Yeah, so thanks a bunch for having me today. Talk a little bit about some of the work that we do that intersects bird migration and then light pollution. Certainly in the poll, I don't need to convince this group about light pollution, and I can fill in maybe some of the bird things that might not be as obvious. But we're primarily coming from the background of being a research lab that tries to untangle some of the questions that we have about bird migration and light pollution. So I'll just start again. I don't need to convince this group, but I took this photo a couple of years ago, and I like to use it in the sense of I took this photo at Pawnee National Grassland in Colorado. It's quite a rural area. It's not really close to many urbanized areas that we would classically relate with light pollution. It has some of the most beautiful nighttime skies where you can see the Milky Way on good nights, like this night here. But then just quickly, the realization that if you look at the horizon of this photo, you can see light pollution creeping into even some of our most rural settings in Colorado and elsewhere. And it just sort of relates to that point that light pollution isn't just related to the immediate spot where the lights are, but that pollution can grow well beyond that, as was mentioned by Miguel and Susan already. And just for orientation, today's talk, the research that we do is largely related to the United States, with some exceptions, but this will more or less be the area that I'll focus on in my slides today. So just to orient you to where that photo was taken, I'm going to zoom into the state of Colorado in the United States, right here. And then I took that photo right here. So quite distant from some of those bright areas in Colorado, like cities like Fort Collins and Boulder and Denver and Colorado Springs, or some of our larger urban centers in this state. Thinking about bird migration, I think Susan laid this out quite nicely already. So I'll just reiterate it in this sense. When we think about all bird species, there's a little over 10,000 bird species globally. And then we could ask the question, what percent of those species are migratory? And what we find is that about 19% of all bird species are migratory. So those might be long distance migrants like the whimbrel. Those might be short distance migrants. They might be altitudinal migrants, but nonetheless, they do a seasonal movement every spring or fall, depending on where you're at in the world. In North America, we could ask that question again with just North American species. And what we find is that the percentage is quite a bit higher. Around 70% of the birds that occupy North America are considered migratory. And then we could follow that question up, especially related to our conversations today. If you're a migratory bird in North America, do you migrate during the day or do you migrate at night? And if we ask that question, we actually see of the migratory species in North America, 80% will be moving under the cover of darkness. So this is a really important point for us to make when we're thinking about when do birds migrate, when do they interact with light pollution, and the vast majority of species will be doing that. And when we think about migratory birds, right, we get excited to see birds often when they're in a terrestrial setting, right? They might be a migratory bird, but they're on the ground and they're resting and refueling after migration. I've been excited to see Western tanagers at my bird feeders today. And that's a bird that's going to migrate at night, but has landed and is foraging through the day. There might be aquatic species using lakes, rivers, other bodies of water, but the real migration is happening up here, as Susan already mentioned, up in these aerial habitats. And my lab studies these aerial habitats, and we're known as an aeroecology lab. One of the challenges of how do we study birds when they're flying at night, when we can't see them, and they're up in these vast airspaces, it's hard to study them and quantify their movements. We do this in a unique way, a relatively unique way, where we use radars to quantify their movements at night. Radars can effectively, illuminate these movements that are going uncharted to the naked eye. We use NEXRAD radars. These are the same radars. If you're probably anywhere in the world, there's a similar radar like this. In the US, they're called NEXRAD or next generation radars, and they're called WSR 88Ds, meaning weather surveillance radars. They were developed in 1988, and they all have Doppler technology. So these are the same exact radars. If you turn on a weather channel and you see a thundercloud coming through with rain, those are often detected by radars. The same radars that detect rain also detect birds. You can think of birds as very large rain droplets moving through the atmosphere at night. So like I said, 80% of our species in North America migrate at night. We can use radar to quantify this even further, to say not just based on species, but abundance of migrants using airspaces. 89% of the activity will occur at night. So that's quite striking. So we've had this question, Susan laid this out nicely with one of our focal examples of birds being attracted to light at the 9/11 tribute in light. But we could ask a question, does light pollution impact migrants at continental scales? Not just to one light source, but broadly light sources across the US. And then the connection here with why would we use radar to study this question is because we can do it at very large scales. We could say, okay, we expect birds to be using maybe a forested patch, but if they're attracted to urban areas, they might be coming off of these urban areas, given light pollution. And then radars will scan the airspaces above these habitats, and we can relate what happened, where they landed, to the habitats on the ground, and we can translate that up into the airspaces. And I won't go into the details of this today, but we use radar data. We assemble lots of it. When I say lots of it, these are often hundreds of thousands of radar images that we assemble. We link it with predictors of migration. So you might expect a forested patch might have more birds, but given today's conversation, we also might expect when there's light pollution, there might be more birds in given areas across the United States. So we've done this. We've mapped stopover density of migratory birds across the continental United States. In this map here is one of the first migration maps of where birds are settling during migration. So all the areas in yellow, you would expect to go to those areas and find more migratory birds than are in maybe the purple or darker colored areas across the United States. So this is a really exciting map for us. We've also taken this map and made it into migratory stopover hotspots for every location across the United States. And now in Colorado, where we had that original photo, we can see the red areas where there's hotspots. You can go to Texas or Florida or California or New York, and you can identify where are the important migration stopover spots across the United States. So this is quite exciting from a conservation standpoint. And so again, we can zoom into these maps. We can provide these maps. They're publicly available, free to download, and agencies are already using these for some of their conservation initiatives. And I'll just close on this point I want to make. So when we made these maps, we could then say, why are some birds in some areas and not in others? So that is to say, what drives migration activity in some of these areas? And what we found, and again, for a plot like this, we looked at a lot of predictors. Over 50 predictors went into our models. I'm just going to show you the top 10 most important drivers of migration activity across the US. So a blue color will mean that it's a positive indicator. Red will be a negative indicator, meaning there are fewer birds because of that variable, or gray meaning neutral. So grasslands across the US in spring were sort of neutral. Percent of mixed forest was positive, right? So maybe that makes sense. When there's more forest, there's more birds. We look at a series of predictors like this. We see cultivated crops or agricultural areas are negative, one of our red predictors. And then importantly, when we look at the top two predictors, sky glow is the second most important positive predictor of where birds are located across the US. We see similar patterns in the fall as well. So we can do this for spring and for fall. And sky glow keeps showing up as a positive predictor. Land cover itself is quite important, but as a single predictor, sky glow is showing up consistently in our models. And that's quite concerning and alarming for us as we think about migratory bird conservation. And so I'll just close on this general idea that I think probably resonates with this group. When we think about light pollution, it is as simple as turning off the switch, right? Things will go dark and it will have an immediate positive benefit for migratory birds. That's not true for most conservation issues, at least related to birds. The challenge is it's not quite that simple, and that there's lots of switches and there's lots of folks interested in having lights on or lights off for different reasons, rightfully so. So what we work towards is trying to message around this, like Susan and Miguel have already mentioned, through education, through outreach, through convergence with interested parties to raise awareness around this problem. So I'll close there, and thank you for the invitation, and thanks for your time.
Wow, that is incredible research, Kyle. Thank you so much for your work and for sharing all of that with us here today. And just a huge thank you to all of our presenters. What incredible information and what incredible humans you are to be doing this really important work. So thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. I am going to bring Susan and Miguel back up to the foreground here. And get started with some questions. There are so many questions, so it might, we definitely will not get through all of them, unfortunately. Is Miguel here still?
I
We
don't know.
lost him.
Is he there? Did he?
Okay, I was like, I can't find him, but okay, if anyone sees him pop up, we'll add him here. But I think the first and most important question that I've been seeing from everybody in the chat is, where can we find all of these resources? We want the maps, we want the video, we want the poster, we want all of those things to use in our outreach and our efforts, and we want to support your work as well. So where is the best place that we can go for all of these things?
So we have a whole resource directory. I'll put a link up here. And I put up our little shop where you can get posters and other materials, where you can download information from all of our themes. So you can go as far back as, the year we did climate change, and get PowerPoint presentations and downloadable education materials and other things that you might want to use. So feel free to go there, and you can also reach out to me if you can't find something, and I'll put my email in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you, Susan. Is the video that Miguel showed, would that be in that resources?
Yeah, and I think somebody just put up the link to it as well from somewhere else. That was a Cornell lab produced piece that was amazing. And we actually translated that into multiple languages. So it was a really great tool. So
Oh,
I
cool.
think
Yeah,
there's
we would
up
love
there.
to use that.
Yeah.
We would have use for that in other languages as well. That's awesome.
Mhm.
And then Kyle, did you throw your link as well for those maps?
Yeah, that's right. We make forecasts of bird migration across the US, where and when birds will be moving. So you can see forecasts of migration on a nightly basis tonight, and then you can see where we're recommending for the season to turn off lights that would have a really positive benefit for the vast majority of birds migrating.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for all of those resources. I know they will be put to good use for the birds for us here with all of our dark sky advocates. So thank you for that. I think the next kind of most important question I would really love to see addressed is, I saw a couple different versions of this come in, but just wondering, in your experience, what are some of the best practices, best ways to approach people, businesses, parking lots, neighbors, cities about changing lighting for birds? What have you seen work? How would you recommend that all these people here learning about this, what can they take from this? And then how do they go put that into action in the real world?
Do you want to go first, Kyle?
Sure. Yeah, so there's a bunch of levels that this can be tackled from, right? We often get a question of, is turning off my porch light really going to have a positive impact for birds, right? And maybe in the grand scheme of it, if just one person did that, maybe not. But it's this collective action that as we amass folks that are interested in reducing light pollution, that are interested in energy savings, that collective action has a net positive benefit. So personal choices can help. Advocating at local political levels helps as well, whether that's town halls or talking with representatives. We've seen this somewhat successful in some target cities that we've worked on. This is especially true in Texas in the United States, where we've worked with local politicians, with city organizers to create what are called proclamations. So if the governor's office, has the control to reduce light pollution on the buildings that they oversee, we've seen a lot of positive reception of that. Sometimes those are seasonal, sometimes they're for a year, multiple years. From a city organizer standpoint, or those sort of leaders, they see it as a positive because they get a net energy savings too. And then they can obviously talk about positive environmental impacts. And then, there's different legislation that can be done. So I think there's a lot of levels. It's hard for me to say, go do this one thing, because it's such a diverse challenge that I'd say you can go from the top or from the bottom up. And I think a lot of groups are doing both of those, if not more. So I'll turn it over to Susan. I'm sure she has great advice too.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I agree. There's just so many levels where you can promote these activities. And in fact, one of the communities near us here in Boulder is just starting their DarkSky promotional work. And it's been fun to watch them work towards that DarkSky certification, or whatever you call it, Vitamaya. But they're also using birds. And so we did as a hook, so we just did an article in the local newspaper. They're having regular meetings. They're bringing it out at the community level. So I think addressing it in as many ways as possible, from personal to neighborhood to community to, like Kyle said, to your city officials, is, that tiered level of the way to make that work, and to get that broader, the broader actions underway.
Awesome. Thank you so much for those great steps and advice. And yeah, Kyle, actually at DarkSky, every year we do a proclamations push during International DarkSky Week. And we have seen success with some of our local advocates and chapters partnering with their local Audubon or bird-friendly building, partners. But maybe just for the both of you, for all of our advocates and DarkSky supporters who are on here today, do you have suggestions on how they can best partner with bird organizations, or ideas for local hubs or resources, how to make that connection more strong between DarkSky and birds?
You going first?
Susan, do you want to go?
Either way, I was just going to say that it was really fun to see the variety of World Migratory Bird Day events and activities, especially during the year that this was the focus theme. And we're doing it again this year too. So in 2022, we saw a lot of night programs. So working with your local bird groups to highlight some activities in the evening. And those are still continuing. Like, I know the city of Broomfield just hosted their Migratory Bird Day activity, and they once again brought in astronomers, but with also the goal of, looking at migrating birds. So it was a fun way to connect birds with the stars and nighttime skies. So I think that's a really great way to do it. And there are some experts out there who can actually identify birds by call at night. So, bring them out with you as well. Kyle, you have it now.
Yeah, and I would echo those things, certainly. And then I think if you're involved in a group and you think that there's an interest or it would help with the education side, reach out to folks like us, if not directly us. And giving virtual talks is easier than ever, I would say. Obviously, we have this example here. And I think most of us would just be thrilled to chat with groups that are interested in learning stuff about birds and light pollution. So don't hesitate to try to make those connections with experts if you think it will be of interest to your group, because that education piece goes a long way. I talk with a lot of groups, and if I tell my best science, if at the end of it, folks just learn that most birds migrate at night, I'll take that as sort of a prominent success, because they learn something. Most people don't know that birds migrate at night. And if they don't know that, why would we make the intuition that they would relate birds to light pollution, right? There'd be a logical disconnect there. So yeah, I would say that's one way of making those connections stronger too.
Thank you. Yeah, I love what you said about the night sky as an environment and dim the light for birds at night. And there's been some questions in the chat and people are popping in, but can you tell us, like, why do birds migrate at night? I feel like that's something we should know if we're advocating for better night lighting.
You want to go for that one, or you want me to?
Either way, we can team up on it. So I saw some
Okay.
stuff in the chat that Martha put in. Certainly birds are migrating at night. They're navigating using things like the stars. So those can be really strong navigational cues. They have other cues as well that aren't related to visual things like magnetic compasses. And then if you think about it, I always make this analogy, right? If you had to run a 5K or a marathon, would you rather run it in Phoenix, Arizona when it's really hot, or maybe cooler latitude somewhere, right? You'd want to run when it's a little cooler, right? So in terms of a decision that a bird can make, they could migrate at night during a cooler atmosphere than sort of really warm in the sun during the day. So that's one trade-off as well. And there's lots of others that we could discuss. I don't know, Susan, if you wanted to add to that.
Sure, I can throw out another one. Is that there's a thought that perhaps some species avoid predation at night, so they might be less visible. So if you notice, raptors are migrating during the day, and most of the smaller birds are migrating at night. Then of course some are kind of crepuscular dawn type of migrators, so it's not a rigid thing either. But yeah, just in terms of self-protection, that's another theory behind the nighttime migration.
Well, thank you so much. We are at the top of the hour. I'm so sorry. There were so many questions. This was such an interesting topic. People were really, really excited about it. So we'll have to have you guys back, more involved in the work that we're doing. Hopefully we'll be able to get bird advocacy in our conference this year in November. But a huge thank you, Kyle. Susan, please pass along our thanks to Miguel as well. Hopefully he's okay. This was such a great presentation. We're eternally grateful for the work that you're doing. And thank you for sharing it with all of us here at DarkSky as well. So if you have any closing words, feel free to share them. And after that, we will wrap up.
Oh, thanks for having us. It's always wonderful to be on these programs. And, for those of us at Environment for the Americas and through World Migratory Bird Day, we really appreciate the expertise of people like Kyle and the Dark Skies programs, and helping to inform what we do. We really, serve as a bridge between the science and the communities, and we depend on that information and the accuracy of it. So thank you very much for coming today. And if you have any questions, I saw a bunch about Bird City and also the New York City lights. Please just pop me an email and be happy to share more information with you.
Yep, and I'll just second that as well. And thanks a bunch to the organizers. We really appreciate it. Know a lot of work goes into organizing things like this. So we really appreciate the invite.
Well, thank you, everybody. And we'll see you hopefully in June for our Dark Sky Advocate Action meeting. And for the birds, I'll end on that. Bye, everyone.